You might have heard that in the summer of 2022, there are going to be new TSP funds. And maybe you haven't heard it, but now you know. There's going to be new TSP funds in the summer of 2022. And there's going to be a lot of them. Actually, thousands of them. It is called the mutual fund window. Basically, allowing you to reach in through your TSP and invest in mutual funds. Lots of them. Lots and lots of options. But there's a catch. It's not free. And today we're going to talk about the fees associated. And just a sneak peek, it's not pretty, okay? It's not pretty. There's lots of fees that are probably going to come in and steal away your retirement dollars. So don't miss this. And again, if you're new here, my name is Dallin Hawes, financial planner serving you guys, helping you guys as federal employees retire confident. So we're going to dive in. I'm actually going to share my screen and walk you right through this. Before we dive into the fees just yet, let's talk about some of the ground rules that the TSP has already announced are going to be a part of using this mutual fund window because it's going to affect the fees that you eventually pay. So it's going to dive right in. Number one, you must have at least $40,000 in your TSP account to use the TSP window. So if you only have 30 grand, you're a new employee, whatever, you can't use it. You got to wait till you have at least 40 grand, at which point the minimum transfer that you have to put then into a mutual fund window is $10,000. So that's a minimum to get started. Lastly, you cannot invest 25% or more than 25% of your money in the mutual fund window. So at least 75% of your money has to be in the core 5 funds of the TSP or the L funds, right? They have to be in those TSP funds. You cannot put more than 75% or more than 25% in this new mutual fund window. So those are the base rules, okay? So let's do an example. Let's say you have 100 grand in the TSP, 200 grand, whatever. Well, okay, let's use 100 grand as an example. You have 100 grand in the TSP. Well, the max you can put into the mutual fund window is 25 grand. And the minimum you could put is 10,000 because that is the minimum initial transfer, 10,000 bucks, right? So hopefully that gets you started on what the rules are. Now, what are the fees? Okay, so let's jump right in. So the first thing we know is there is an annual maintenance fee of $95. $95 every year, an annual maintenance fee. Now, there is also a per trade fee, which you may not be familiar with because in the TSP, there's been no trade fees up to this point. But to move money from your TSP core funds over to the mutual fund window, it's going to cost you $28.75 per trade. And as I understand it right now, at least per what we've already know, again, this isn't instituted yet because it's still in the summer, so all the details aren't fleshed out yet, but as it is understood right now, you can't take money straight from your paycheck and put it straight into the mutual fund window. So each transfer that you have to do manually is going to cost you $28.75. Okay, next, and this is probably the biggest one, it is the fees for the underlying mutual funds. Now, if you don't know what a mutual fund is, basically, there is what they call a fund manager. It's a smart guy that he goes in and he picks which investments this fund should invest in. And then you invest in the fund, and however that fund manager does, that gets passed on to you. Now, the issue with this, whenever you have people actively going in and making changes, picking the things that they invest in, it costs money. And that money is paid for through fees that you as the investor pay, okay? For example, in the TSP right now, in the 5 core funds, the G fund, the F fund, the C, S, and I funds, all those funds, there's actually fees. Now, because those core 5 funds are actually, they track indexes, so there's not people going in and actually manually picking certain investments. It just tracks certain big indexes. So it's very, very, very low cost relatively. But if you pick certain mutual funds that are more actively managed by people, then it gets more expensive, right? And for this example, we're going to assume that the fee that you're going to pay in a mutual fund is 1%. Now, the fees can be more than that. The fees can be less. It depends on which you pick. We don't know. We'll see what the actual list of all the mutual funds are. But again, there's going to be thousands. So I'm sure this fee is going to vary widely depending on what you actually pick if you choose to invest in this. Okay, so that's going to be the underlying thing. So you're going to pay a percentage of how much money you go ahead and put into the mutual fund window, right? And there's certain mutual funds. So let's assume 1%. Well, if you have 100 grand in a certain mutual fund with a 1% annual fee, that's going to cost you $1,000 every year to invest in that mutual fund, right? Okay, next, there's a $55 annual fee that also you will pay as well, and the TSP board has proposed that this will be adjusted every 3 years as the cost of the service goes up as well. So those are the list of the fees. So there's lots of fees here, okay? So now let's do a little compare and contrast, right? Let's say, okay, what are you paying right now if you stick just in the TSP core funds or the L funds? And what would you pay if you put a big chunk into this mutual fund window? What would that look like for you? What would it cost you to do something like that? So I'm going to clear my screen here, get a fresh palette. Okay, so we know, of course, if you are just in the core TSP funds, there is a fee, like I was saying. And right now, the average TSP fee is 0.076%. Okay, so if you invest, let's say, in the G fund or the F fund or the C fund, your average fee that you're going to be paying is 0.076%. So a very, very small percentage of your money you're going to be paying in fees. Now, what does that actually look like in dollars and cents? So let's do an example. Let's say that you have $400,000 in the TSP and you're investing just in the core funds. Well, what is that going to cost you every year? Well, that's going to cost you about $304, okay? Assuming the average fee, again, is 0.076. And again, those fees change over time, and that was actually a big increase since last year. But assuming it's relatively close and you have about $400,000 in the TSP, you're going to pay about $300 a year for your money to be in those certain funds, which again is very, very relatively cheap. Are there other funds out there that are cheaper? Yeah, there are some, but this is relatively very, very affordable. Okay, so now that's our benchmark. It's about $300, right? That it costs you now with $400,000 in the TSP. Well, what if you use the mutual fund window? What are we talking here? Well, first we know you're going to pay $95 a year, and then $55 for the annual fee, and then of course a per trade fee of $28. So let's be conservative. Let's say you only need 4 trades in a single year, so this would be about $115 a year just for the trades. Now, again, the big one is the mutual fund fees. Okay, so let's assume that again you have $400,000 in the TSP, and you take $100,000 of that and you put in the mutual fund window, and you invest in a fund that has a fee of 1%. Well, that's going to cost you $1,000 a year, right? $1,000 a year to invest in that mutual fund with that 1% fee. Okay. Now, you also have $300,000 still remaining in the core TSP funds, so we're going to add that in. And if you add all this together, okay, I'm actually going to clear my screen here again. You add all these fees together, okay, you're looking at $1,493 a year is what you're looking at, right? So compare that to about the $300 that you're paying right now just to have your money in the core TSP funds. That's almost 5 times as much. 5 times as much to invest in the TSP, right? Now, of course, the next question that always comes up is, well, okay, it costs more, I get that, but what if they earn more? What if they do better over on the mutual fund window, and so it more than makes up for the fee? And if that was the case, I'd say, awesome, do it, that's great, because I'm not opposed to fees, right? We buy stuff all the time that costs money, that costs a fee, right? But the question is it worth it? Is it worth it? And so for you, it's like, okay, is it worth it? Well, if you look at some stats, basically, if you look at the average mutual fund, if it would be worth it, it would have to do better than, let's say, the C fund or the S fund or these big benchmarks that you do naturally just in the TSP, investing in the core TSP funds like the C fund and the S fund. But on average, the vast majority of mutual funds actually don't do as well as the market or don't beat the market, right? So over time, you're actually going to do worse than the C fund or the S fund. Now, are there some mutual funds that do better than the market every year? Yes, there are. But they don't do it consistently, right? And so for you to first find one that luckily does better than the market, but then consistently does it over time is very, very slim. The numbers are against you, okay? And my advice for you is don't fight the numbers. Don't fight the numbers. Use the numbers to your advantage. So long story short, it's going to cost you a lot more to use the mutual fund window. A lot more, right? Is that the end of the world? Well, no. Maybe it could allow you to be more diversified in different investments. Yeah, but long story short, it's going to cost you more. It's going to cost you more. So probably not the best idea if it's not going to perform better and actually earn you more dollars for your retirement down the road. Now, one big question that we have to answer is, okay, what if I don't want to use the mutual fund window? Now that we've talked about the fees are high, maybe I don't want to use it. Do I have to pay any of these fees, whether it's the maintenance fee, the annual fee, any of these fees, if I don't use the mutual fund window? If I don't touch it, do any of these apply to you? And the answer is, well, it doesn't look like it. Right now, as it seems, the TSP board is trying to make a point of, okay, if you want to use the mutual fund window, perfect, you'll just have to pay the fees associated. If you don't want to, no problem, you'll still be able to get the low TSP fees that you've enjoyed all along. Now, the TSP fee has actually increased by about 30% over the last year, just because they're trying to modernize the TSP and things like that. So you're paying a little bit of it, probably, because they're trying to modernize things, but overall, it's going to be a lot of modernization things that are going to impact everyone, not just those that are in the mutual fund window. So if you have any thoughts yourself, or if you got any information from the TSP recently, put it in the comments below and share so the whole community can grow, learn, and get better. So I hope that's helpful. If you have any questions yourself, put in the comments below, and I do my best, or one of my team members, to get back to you, and have a great rest of your day.